So I'm now calling to order the matter of Jordan Street versus Reese Taylor, cause number 18 CV 00120. Counsel, you may proceed with pretrial arguments.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. On behalf of the plaintiff, Jordan Street, my name is Austin Wallach. That's W-A-L-L-I-C-K. And I'm joined today by my co-chair, Ms. Zua Zhao.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Zua Zhao. That's Z-H-A-O.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Now, after opposing counsel has a chance to introduce herself, I do have a few housekeeping matters that I'd like to go over with the court, and then one substantive motion to discuss.
Okay. Ms. Dworkin, you're free to introduce yourself.
Yes, good morning, Your Honor. My name is Olivia Dworkin, and I, along with my co-counsel, Mr. Brendan Flynn.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Mr. Flynn.
We represent the defendant in today's case, Mr. Reese Taylor.
Good deal. All right, Mr. Wallach, you are free to proceed with your pretrial arguments.
Yes, Your Honor. First, with regard to the housekeeping matters, given that this is a somewhat unique digital trial, do you have any preference about whether we sit at counsel table or stand at different points in the trial today, or may we do so at our discretion?
I don't care. I want y'all to be comfy. Whatever is comfy, Olivia, I know you've got a different view. Whatever is comfy for y'all. We're just going to make this work as best that it works for y'all.
Yes, Your Honor. Second, there are a series of exhibits in this case in the record marked 1 through 22. Now, I've spoken to opposing counsel before trial, and if it's amenable to the court, we're going to have retain those markings for the purposes of trial today.
Perfect.
Also, to that end, Your Honor, there are certain exhibits, specifically exhibits 16 through 19, as well as exhibit 21, that have been pre-admitted. So I just wanted to make sure the court was aware.
Can I write that down real quick? You said
yes, Your Honor. 16 through 19,
okay,
as well as 21.
Pre-admitted.
And to add to that, Your Honor, I have also spoken to opposing counsel, and we've agreed to admissions for exhibits 2, as well as exhibits 3 in this case, that I intend to use in my opening statement.
Yes, sir.
Also, Your Honor, as we enter exhibits, because there is no jury in this trial today, may we publish them freely for the court, the parties, and the witness to see?
Absolutely.
And in publishing, may we use the share screen function today and put them up on the screen?
Absolutely. Just don't rely on me to do that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Finally, I've prepared a PowerPoint for my opening statement today. I have sent it to opposing counsel. As I mentioned, it does have a few exhibits in it. Now, she has seen that PowerPoint, and as I understand it, she has no objections. Given that, is Your Honor okay with us publishing that PowerPoint on the screen throughout my opening statement?
I'm fine with that, Ms. Dworkin. I just want to check you're in agreement that you have no objection to that.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Wallach showed it to me during pretrial. I have no objections.
Yes, ma'am. Sounds great.
I think that takes care of all of the housekeeping matters, Your Honor. If opposing counsel has nothing else, then I'm happy to move into the substantive motion we'd like the court to do.
Sure, you've got about 3 minutes left, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I do have a few housekeeping measures before Mr. Wallach gets into his motions in limine. At this time, I would just like to invoke Rule 615, which calls for the constructive sequestration of all witnesses. Okay. If opposing counsel is amenable to that, I would just ask that those witnesses be constructively sequestered.
Mr. Wallach, sorry, anything on that?
No, Your Honor, that's great with us.
Okay, good deal.
And in line with noting that certain exhibits are pre-admitted, I also just wanted to note that there are certain exhibits that opposing counsel and I have stipulated are authentic. Those are exhibits 14, 15, and 22.
14, 15, 22, authentic. Okay, cool.
And then opposing counsel and I have also stipulated that exhibit 20 is a learned treatise and falls within the exception under 803.18. And we have said that both sides may read portions of this exhibit onto the record so long as it's okay with Your Honor.
It's fine with me, whatever y'all agreed to.
That's all we have for pretrial, Your Honor.
Okie dokie.
With that, Your Honor, I'd like to move into the motion in limine portion of the pretrial matters.
Sure.
Your Honor, by brief way of background, this is a case in which the plaintiff, Jordan Street, has brought a case for the wrongful death of her daughter against the defendant, Reese Taylor. Now, the defendant was the decedent's soccer coach, and on September 7th, 2018, during a particularly hot day, the defendant forced Miss Street to do soccer drills that were extremely demanding in 105-degree heat. These ultimately led to her passing away on the soccer field. Now, our only motion today was to exclude any evidence or testimony of any sort of prior drug use that the decedent may have engaged in prior to September 7th of 2018. I have spoken to opposing counsel about some of the exhibits in this case, as well as some of the depositions that elicit this testimony, and she's agreed that any instance prior to September 7th, 2018 will not be discussed with any regard to previous drug use. Okay. So we've agreed on the motion. I just wanted to put the court on notice that that testimony will not be offered today.
Okay, so everything before September 7th, 2017. Ms. Dorkin, you have anything you need to add to that?
No, Your Honor, I just want to clarify that the drug usage prior to September 7th, 2018, it's possible that the cocaine that eventually ended up in Rory Street's system on September 7th may have been ingested the day before. So long as we're allowed to talk about the drugs that were in her system on the day that she died, we're okay with excluding anything that happened prior to that instance.
And Mr. Wallach, it looks like you're shaking your head yes, so that
yes, I believe that's our understanding as well.
Perfect. Okay.
With that, the plaintiff is ready to proceed to opening statements.
All right. Beautiful. Okay. So you used 2, 3. All right. And now, Ms. Dorkin, do you have anything for me for pretrial?
I do, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am. Hit me.
Yes, Your Honor. We have a good faith belief that the plaintiff may try to bring up evidence of certain precautionary measures that the defendant put in place after Rory Street's death. Specifically, the fact that he installed tents and now has Gatorade stations set up at the practice field for all of his team members. We have moved to exclude any evidence of these precautionary measures taken after Rory Street's death as a violation of Rule 407, a subsequent measure.
Okay. Mr. Wallach, in response?
Yes, Your Honor. We don't intend to elicit testimony about any of the steps taken as subsequent remedial measures after September 7th, 2018. Unless, of course, the door is opened at some point during trial with any sort of allegation that it was not feasible to put these measures in place earlier.
Ms. Dorkin, anything on that?
That's our understanding as well, Your Honor.
Okay, good deal. Granted, it sounds like we've got everything lined out. Y'all agreed on most everything. Do you have anything else from Ms. Dorkin?
Yes, Your Honor. I would just like to note that this trial is bifurcated. At this stage, we are only determining liability and not damages. And as such, I would just move to exclude any references to damages throughout today's trial.
Mr. Wallach, any response?
Yes, Your Honor. We don't intend to elicit any testimony regarding economic or non-economic damages in this case. And any conversations about the loss of the plaintiff's daughter will be narrowly focused on basically laying out for Your Honor who the players were in this case and helping Your Honor understand each witness's testimony.
Ms. Dorkin, is that amenable? Sounds pretty good to me.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
I'm ready to proceed.
Okie dokie. Okay. Just give me 1 second so I can get the timer reset. And so y'all know you can check in with me on time. You've got 55 minutes each. I know y'all know the rules.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okie dokie. Hold on. Let's see. Alrighty, plaintiff, I am ready for you to begin whenever you are.
Yes, Your Honor. May I take a brief moment to prepare?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And may I proceed?
You sure may.
Winning cannot come at all costs. September 7th, 2018, it started as any other day for Jordan Street. She gets up, she puts on a pot of coffee, and she starts getting ready for a long day at work. She wakes up her only daughter, Rory, who is the light of her life. Rory is a teenager just starting her senior year at Waco High School, and she's incredible. She's a superstar athlete, and she's already received multiple Division I scholarship offers. She shares a love and a dedication to soccer, just like her mom. So Jordan gets Rory in the car. She drives her to school and she drops her off. As she waves goodbye to her daughter, what she doesn't know and what she simply cannot know is that she'll be doing it for the last time. Jordan Street will never again see her daughter alive. Later that afternoon, as she's preparing to leave work after a long day, she hears news that no parent should ever have to hear. That her daughter, the most important thing in her world, died at a soccer practice. After the defendant in this case, Coach Reese Taylor, punished her on the soccer field, pushing her to the brink time and time again, causing her to die from heat stroke. All because the defendant wanted to win more than anything else. But winning cannot come at all costs. That's why the plaintiff, Rory Street's mother, has brought this wrongful death action against the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor, for causing her daughter's death. Now, Your Honor, we'll show you today by a preponderance of the evidence that it was the defendant's actions and the defendant's choices to punish Ms. Street on that soccer field that ultimately caused her to die. And this will become clear throughout the 3 points that I'm going to bring up through trial today. First, that Rory Street and her mother, they trusted the defendant as a coach. Second, that the defendant broke the rules, and when he did, he broke that trust. And third, that the defendant's actions cost Ms. Street her life. Now, Your Honor, I'd like to take each of those points in turn briefly, starting with that first point, that Rory Street and her mother trusted Coach Taylor. You'll learn today that the defendant, he's not new to coaching athletes. He's not new to the world of sports. In fact, Your Honor, you'll learn that he went to college with the specific focus of getting a degree in physical education, that he's taught for more than 20 seasons of soccer, that he's been coaching for decades. You'll learn that the defendant often receives training about the best techniques, practices, and drills that he can use to make sure that his players are at their absolute best. Today, we'll even show, Your Honor, one of the trainings he received just 2.5 months before Rory Street died on his soccer team. And the evidence will show that the defendant knew that on particularly hot days, he was obligated to give his players a break every 15 minutes. He knew they should have plenty of water. He knew they should be in the shade if possible, that he should be keeping them from being overworked. Frankly, Your Honor, he knew how to protect his players. But on September 7th of 2018, you'll learn that he didn't protect Ms. Street. Instead, he punished her. And that's what brings us to our second point in today's case, that the defendant broke the rules and broke that trust. As Your Honor will learn today, September 7th, 2018 was one of those particularly hot days that I just mentioned. Now, you'll be able to see a copy of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, report for that day in question. Practice started at 3:15 in the afternoon that day, and as you'll note, it was already 100 degrees or higher at that time. During that soccer practice, the peak temperature actually rose all the way to 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we likely all know that that's not unusual here in Waco, but anyone who's been out in those temperatures, especially for extended periods of time, can tell you that the last thing you want to do is be pushing yourself to the absolute limit, because that in and of itself can be dangerous. But despite knowing the risk that was posed to his players by doing such extreme exercise in such extreme conditions, the defendant pushed Rory Street and her teammates harder and harder and harder. The evidence will show that he didn't give them water breaks every 15 minutes as he was supposed to. didn't provide a shady area for them to relax under, and didn't even bother to reschedule practice to a later time of day when it would be cooler for his players to practice. Instead, he wanted to win at all costs, so he just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. He thought that Miss Street was slacking that day, that she wasn't being a good listener, that she wasn't living up to her potential. The evidence will show that the defendant saw her slowing down and took that as a reason to push her even further. You're going to hear that he made her run sprints on a side field that was referred to as Burma Road. Now, this was an intense drill that required the players who were running Burma Road to sprint 30 yards, dribble a ball another 30 yards, shoot on an open goal, and then crawl on their hands and feet all 60 yards back to the start before doing it over again and again and again. That's what Miss Street was forced to do that day in 100+ degree heat without any shade. But even having her do that extensive drill, that wasn't enough. When the defendant felt that Miss Street still wasn't living up to the lofty expectations he set for her, he didn't ask her what was going wrong. He didn't ask her if the heat was affecting her in some way. Instead, he called her over to that main field, and the evidence will show that he had the members of her team line up for a drill they had never done before. Miss Street had to dribble the soccer ball past each of her teammates, and when she got close, they were each instructed to run, slide, and attempt to steal the ball by tackling her feet out from under her, sending her tumbling to the earth over and over and over, until, as Your Honor will learn today, she eventually was not able to get up again. And that's what brings me to my third and final point in today's case, that it was the defendant's actions that caused Miss Street's death. They cost her her life. The evidence will show that by the time the defendant was making her do the slide tackle drill, Miss Street, she was already pale, looking tired, nearly lifeless, that she was struggling to breathe, that she was bent over with her hands on her hips, groaning. And still, the defendant had her continue until, after being tackled to the ground for the 15th time in a row, she began violently convulsing. The defendant will claim today to not have known it at the time, but even the defendant will be forced to admit to you in his own words that he saw Miss Street struggling. His actions caused Miss Street to suffer heat stroke and to go into cardiac arrest. That teenage girl died on a hot, dry soccer field because an ambulance couldn't even get to her due to the extent of that heat damage. All because the defendant wanted to win at all costs. Now, the defense today may try to shift your focus, may try to get you to think certain things about Miss Street. They may posit that she, a teenager, is responsible for her own death while she was at soccer practice. But despite what they may try to get you to think, Your Honor, the evidence will make clear throughout trial today that the defendant pushing Miss Street so hard, those actions are ultimately what led to her death. When winning at any cost means losing the life of a child, the price is too high. Rory Street, she'll never get a chance to go on and be that star athlete she wanted to be. Her mom won't get to see what her life could be, all because she had to pay the price for the defendant's desire to win at all costs. And Your Honor, everyone in this room knows today, your verdict, it can't replace Miss Street. It can't bring her back. No amount of money in the world could remedy this loss. But what your verdict can do is tell the defendant he can't push young girls to the point of death just for the sake of having a winning soccer record. Because at that point, it's not winning. It's just negligence. And that's why I'll ask that you find the defendant liable. Thank you.
43:30 remaining. Ms. Dworkin, whenever you're ready to proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court?
Yes, ma'am.
You can't prevent what you can't predict. When a person dies prematurely, we call that a tragedy. It's in our nature that when that happens, we look for meaning, for some way to put the pieces back together and explain what happened. Rory Street's death was a tragedy. Ordinarily, that would be the end of the matter. We would grieve and celebrate her life and try to keep moving on. But today, your duty is much greater. You see, here in a court of law, we have to separate fact from emotion. And when you do that, when you put all of the pieces together, it'll become clear that Coach Taylor couldn't have possibly predicted what happened to Rory on September 7, 2018. And you can't prevent what you can't predict. Well, Mr. Wallach just came before you and he told you about Coach Taylor's soccer practices. And specifically, he told you about that practice on September 7, 2018. He told you about how hot it was outside, about how Coach Taylor told Rory to go run Burma Road, about how Rory had to practice some slide tackle drills, and about how Rory eventually died that day. But what Mr. Wallach didn't tell you, but what you will hear today, is that Rory never once asked for a break, never once asked for a sip of water, never once said that she was feeling sick. And Mr. Wallach also didn't tell you that Rory was found with drugs in her system when she died. She was found with cocaine in her system. You'll hear today that those drugs that Rory had in her system, those are risk factors for exertional heat stroke. And that absent those risk factors, the likelihood of death by cause of heat stroke, well, that's less than 5%. Because Rory never let her coach know that she wasn't feeling well, and because Coach Taylor had no way of knowing that Rory had cocaine in her system when she showed up for practice that day, he could not have predicted that Rory would die that afternoon. And you can't prevent what you can't predict. Despite this, the plaintiff has brought a wrongful death suit against Coach Taylor. And in doing so, they've assumed the burden of proof. This means that they have to prove each and every element of their claim by a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. And today, the plaintiff's going to have to prove to you that Coach Taylor had a duty to Rory, that Coach Taylor breached that duty to Rory, and that that breach was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. A proximate cause, that's a loaded term. That means that not only does the plaintiff have to prove that Rory Street's death was foreseeable, but they also have to show that Coach Taylor was more than 50% responsible for what happened. That's because in the state of Texas, if Rory is more than 50% to blame for her own death, you cannot find Coach Taylor liable. It is the plaintiff's burden to prove those elements to you, and they won't be able to do so today. And to show you why, you'll hear from some witnesses today, some live on camera and some by deposition by those who can't be here today. You'll hear that we don't dispute much of what Mr. Wallach told you. You'll hear that it was hot that day. Coach Taylor did order Rory to run Burma Road, and that she did go through slide tackle drills with her teammates. But you'll also hear that none of this was unusual. Your Honor, you and I both know that in Waco, Texas, it gets hot outside, especially in the summer. These players on the Waco High soccer team, they're no strangers to playing in the heat. And that's why there's always water available on the sidelines whenever anybody needs it, and they are welcome to take a break whenever they need it, whenever they get too hot. Furthermore, you'll hear that Burma Road is a tradition at Waco High. It dates all the way back to the 1990s, and Coach Taylor himself even had to run it when he was on the high school soccer team. You'll also hear today that slide tackles, those are common in soccer. They happen in every single game, and that it's both common and necessary to practice these tackles so that you know how to avoid them in a real game and how to land safely if you can't. Your Honor, players may have gotten hurt by being tackled during a game, but you'll hear today that no other student has ever died doing such a drill. Perhaps most importantly, throughout today's trial, you'll hear today all of the things that made it so that Coach Taylor could not have possibly predicted what happened to Rory Street that afternoon. You'll hear about Rory's demeanor, about the lack of any indication that she was feeling sick or that she needed a break. You'll hear about how Rory was Coach Taylor's star player, that she was in great shape and peak physical condition, and how she should have been able to weather this drill just like she had done many times in the past. You'll hear about the drugs in Rory's system and how that made her more susceptible to heat stroke. When you hear this testimony, I urge you to think about Coach Taylor and how he could not prevent what he could not predict. At the end of today's trial, I'll stand where I'm standing now. I'll review all of the evidence that we will hear today, and I'll ask you to find the only verdict that the evidence allows. I'll ask you to find Coach Reese Taylor not liable. Thank you.
Your Honor, I think you're still muted at this point.
Whoops, I'm so sorry. Mr. Wilkin, you finished with 4803, just so you're tracking, and I'm ready whenever you are, Mr. Wallach. I apologize about that.
Not a problem, Your Honor. Before we call any witnesses today, I'd like to read onto the record a highlighted portion of Exhibit 16. That's the expert report that was compiled by the plaintiff's expert in this case, and that exhibit has already been ruled admissible for proceedings today. I'd like to just highlight 2 or 3 portions of that, if Your Honor doesn't mind.
You may begin.
May I publish that onto the screen as I read the portions I'd like to highlight?
You sure may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Dow, if we can get that published. Thank you. I'd like to start on that second page, Your Honor, beginning with the section Overview of Opinion. It reads, in relevant part, Rory Street died as a result of heat exhaustion and/or heat stroke. Moving on to the bottom portion of that page of the expert report, it reads, Aubrey Saracen described Rory Street was playing sloppy on the day in question. Once Rory Street was running Burma Road, Aubrey Saracen described her as being really struggling and unusually pale. Now, according to Aubrey Saracen, at that point, Rory Street said she was feeling funny and she complained of chest pain. Moments later, when Coach Taylor had Rory line up for the slide tackling drill, Aubrey Saracen described Rory as really pale, like lifeless almost, hands on her hips and breathing heavy. Finally, after the 15th slide tackle, Aubrey Saracen described Rory laying on the ground, groaning and convulsing. Further, towards the bottom of this page, it reads in relevant part, "It is also my opinion, with a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that Rory Street's death was not a result of cocaine use." Your Honor, having highlighted those portions of this expert report, we're ready to begin with witness testimony.
You may do so.
Your Honor, our first witness today is the plaintiff in this case. That's Jordan Street. Now, pursuant to a pretrial order, the plaintiff herself is stipulated by both parties today to be unavailable for the purposes of testifying. We don't intend to call the plaintiff in person, though we would like, if the court will allow, we'd like to read portions of her deposition onto the record, with myself serving as the questioning attorney and my co-counsel, Ms. Zhao, reading the answers to the questions that I asked. I have shown these portions to opposing counsel. I understand that she has no objection to this.
Ms. Horgan, is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor, that's our understanding as well.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, Mr. Wallach, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. And may I have my co-counsel turn on her camera while she reads the answers?
Of course, absolutely. I'm sorry. Yep, y'all may begin. I'm going to turn my microphone off, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. Can you please state your name for the record?
My name is Jordan Street.
How old are you?
I'm 55 years old.
Where are you from?
I live in Waco and I have all my life.
Are you married?
I am not. I was married, but my spouse passed away several years ago.
Do you have any children?
I did. My daughter, Rory.
I'm showing you what has been marked as Exhibit 3. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do. This is a photograph of Rory.
And is Exhibit 3 a fair and accurate depiction of Rory as she appeared on September 7th, 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, while reading, may we publish that photo? Now, what happened to Rory?
Sorry about that. Rory died at soccer practice on September 7th, 2018.
Were you at practice that day?
No, I was at work.
So do you have any information or knowledge about what happened that day?
No, other than what I've heard from others about what happened, but I didn't see it.
Given that you don't have any knowledge about what happened the day of the practice, on the practice field, let's focus on Rory. How old was Rory at the time of her death?
17 years old.
Was Rory in high school?
Yes.
Where did she go to school?
Rory went to Waco High, just like me.
Did Rory participate in any sports?
Yes. She played varsity soccer for the school. She also played soccer for a private traveling team on the weekends. To be honest, that kid's life was pretty much soccer 24/7. Getting her to read a book was the hard part.
When did Rory start playing soccer?
Oh gosh, when she was little, 4 or 5 years old. I went and signed her up to get her started with just being out and being athletic and being around other kids. But she took right to it and never looked back. Before you knew it, we were spending weekends driving all over Texas to soccer tournaments, and the next 12 or so years were just kind of a blur. Soccer tournaments, soccer practices, soccer camps, soccer everything.
Was Rory good?
Oh, Rory was a superb athlete. She'd gotten several scholarship offers from Division I programs to play soccer in college. Southern Methodist University, Dallas Baptist University, Austin College, and the University of Texas at Dallas. They had all offered her a scholarship. It was so exciting to think about being able to watch her play at the top level in college against some of the best in the country. Plus, she would have gotten a great education. She had such a bright future, and I was excited to see it all play out.
Was soccer something that the two of you shared?
You know, I played soccer in college, so I already loved the game. But I didn't care what the sport was. I just loved having a kid that was into sports of any kind. I loved getting up on the weekends when she was little to go kick the ball in the backyard and let her try to dribble it past me. I loved talking about games and strategy. It brought back so many memories of my playing days, but this was even better because it was my kid, and it made her so happy. By the time Rory was in high school, we even had a favorite team, West Ham United, that we would root on together every weekend during the English Premier League season. We loved going to T-Bone's barbecue to watch matches. I thought we would be forever blowing bubbles.
Your Honor, that's all that we intend to read into the record from this witness's deposition. I spoke with Ms. Dworkin before trial. She indicated that there may be parts that she wanted to read. I'm not sure if she wants to do that at this time or if the court has a preference.
Ms. Dorkin, it's up to you. You tell me what's going on.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, I would like to read certain other portions of the deposition onto the record using Mr. Flynn, if I may.
Sure. Give me just 1 second to reset your timer. So 36:30 left. Three. All right. And Ms. Dorkin and Mr. Flynn, I'm ready to go whenever y'all are.
Yes, Your Honor. So Mr. Flynn will be starting on page 7, line 16. When you were at Waco High, did you play any sports?
Played soccer, just like Rory, but we won a state championship while I was there.
When you were playing soccer at Waco High, did you ever have to run Burma Road?
Hell yeah, we did. I remember doing that when we were dogging it, or if we weren't in the correct position or something, coach would send us off to run Burma Road. But I'll tell you this, none of my coaches ever made me or any other kid keep going when it was obvious that we were exhausted. Discipline is one thing, but that is just dangerous.
Do you know what a slide tackle is?
Sure,
Are slide tackles part of the game of soccer?
of course they are. Turn on any game and you're going to see players at every level performing slide tackles. That is part of the deal.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Your Honor, that's all I wanted to read at this time.
Yes, ma'am. Let's see. You've got 47:05 remaining.
Thank you.
With that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is prepared to call its first live witness today. We call Aubrey Saracen to the stand.
And Mr. Wallach, if you can just give me 2 seconds to get your time set back up. Sorry, I'm
Yes, Your Honor, not a problem.
to do this. All right, you have 36:30 and you may begin whenever you're ready, Mr. Wallach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning. I'm Aubrey Saracen.
Ms. Saracen, how old are you?
I'm 18 years old.
And where do you live?
I live here in Waco, Texas.
Do you go to school currently?
Yes, I am in high school. I go to Waco High.
What year are you in?
I'm a senior in high school.
So what are your plans for next year after you graduate?
I received a National Merit Scholarship to go attend Rice University, and I hope to walk onto the soccer team there too.
Okay, now you just mentioned soccer there. How long have you been playing soccer for?
Oh man, basically my whole life. I started when I was really little and obviously played the whole way through high school.
Now, Ms. Saracen, you know that you're here today to talk about the death of one of your teammates, Miss Street. Can you explain to the judge what your relationship with Miss Street was like?
Yeah, Rory was my best friend. We grew up together. We've played soccer together our whole lives. I mean, every day after school, I'd go over to her house, I feel like. I mean, we've been close ever since we were little.
Was Rory, Miss Street, was she a good soccer player?
Oh my goodness, Rory was the best. I mean, hands down the best on our team. I don't think anyone could argue with that.
Now, I understand that this may be difficult, Miss Saracen, given your relationship with her, but I do want to talk about the day that Miss Street passed away. Were you with her when she died?
Yes.
Do you recall where she passed away?
Yeah, we were at soccer practice at our soccer field.
And do you remember what date this was?
Yes, it was September 7th, 2018.
Now, focusing on that day specifically, do you remember if anything about the weather stood out to you?
Oh yeah, it was scorching hot that day. I mean, it had to have been in the hundreds.
Okay, I want to focus for a moment on the minutes leading up to your friend's death. What do you recall seeing at that point?
I was right before she died. Is that what you mean?
Yes, before she died.
Before she died. Well, I was over running Burma Roads at the soccer practice across or on the field across from our soccer field. So I was close, but Rory was not looking good from what I could see. She looked pretty pale.
Do you recall right before she died what she was doing on the main field?
Yeah, she was doing a drill.
What kind of drill was that?
The drill she was doing was it was a new drill. It wasn't something we normally did. Coach was having us slide tackle, having the whole team go and slide tackle Rory.
Now, you just mentioned slide tackling there. For those of us that aren't as familiar with soccer, can you explain what exactly that entails, please?
Yeah, so Coach was pretty mad at Rory, so he had her basically do this as a punishment, some kind of punishment, I guess. And a slide tackle was Rory would go and she'd be dribbling the ball, kind of kicking it across the field, and then there was a line of my teammates, and they would go and try to slide on the ground like a slide tackle and try to get the ball away from Rory. And it's a defensive tactic to try to get the ball away.
Now, when you're slide tackling someone, does it involve physical contact? Is there the possibility for injury?
Yes, it's very physical. You're potentially tripping the person. A lot of times they'll end up falling.
And you said that you were over on a separate field when you saw Miss Street doing this drill. How clearly were you able to see her?
I could see her just fine.
Could you estimate for us roughly about how far away you were?
Yeah, I was about 20 yards away, I'd say.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago that she looked like she was struggling and that she was really pale. Did you notice anything else about the way she appeared during this drill?
Yeah, she was really struggling. She was breathing really heavy. She had her hands on her hips. She looked like she was really in distress, and that was pretty abnormal for her because she was a star athlete, and I'd never seen her look like that before.
And with regard to the potential for physical contact or any sort of injury, did you see Miss Street fall to the ground at any point during this drill?
Yes, every time she was slide tackled, she fell.
Now, where was the coach during this drill?
He was right next to where the drill was being run, blowing the whistle, having the players run at Rory.
After Miss Street collapsed for the first time during this drill, did the coach stop that drill?
No.
At that point, did the coach give her a break?
No.
Did the coach at that point give her any sort of water?
No.
Did you ever see from where you were standing, the coach asked the trainer to come check on her and see if she was okay?
No.
Now, I want to focus specifically on what he did do. When she had collapsed for the first time during that drill, what, if anything, did you see the coach of the soccer team doing with Rory?
Well, he got really mad at her because he'd been mad at her all practice for some reason. And he just went up to her, yanked her up by the back of her jersey, and told her to keep running the drill.
Do you recall how many times she fell to the ground over the course of this entire drill?
Yeah, I would say it was about 15 times. It was really brutal to watch.
Now, what happened after that 15th time that Miss Street was knocked down?
That last time, she just fell to the ground and started shaking uncontrollably and just looked like she was having a seizure.
After she fell that 15th time, did you ever see her get up again?
No, she just fell and she never got up again.
Okay, now let's make some things very clear today. Who was the coach at that soccer practice?
It was Coach Reese Taylor.
And is Coach Taylor the defendant in today's case?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk to you about the way he treated Rory during the rest of that practice. You mentioned that he was very upset at her. Did you ever see him yelling at her?
Yes, he was yelling at her during the practice, pretty much the whole time.
Do you recall what he was saying?
Yes, he was saying that she was pretty much worthless that day, that she wasn't doing well on the field, that she couldn't score on an open goal. Those are the things that I remember.
Prior to having her do that slide tackling drill, did he do anything else to discipline her or remove her from the field at any point?
Yes, he had her, I was running Burma Roads, and then he had her come over and start running the Burma Roads for me after yelling at her repeatedly.
Now, just so we're clear again, what exactly does Burma Road entail?
Burma Road is when we'll go 30 yards running on the field, and then we'll go 30 yards dribbling a ball on the field, like just kicking it towards the goal. And then we'll shoot and score on an open goal where there's no goalie. And then we'll have to bear crawl on all fours back that full 60 yards back to the beginning and just repeat that process.
Is that a drill that the members of your team are forced to do often?
It's not super often, but it's not unknown for him to have people do that.
Okay. Now, after you saw Miss Street get sent over to Burma Road, did you notice anything about her then?
Yes, even at that time, she did not look good. She was really pale and just looked pretty sick.
Now, let's talk about where the two of you were on the soccer field at that time. Do you have a copy of Exhibit 2 in front of you, Miss Saracen?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'd like you to go ahead and take a look at that for me. Do you recognize what Exhibit 2 is?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell the judge what that exhibit is, please?
Yes, this is an aerial view of the soccer field, our soccer field at our high school.
And does this have any sort of distinct markings on it?
Yes, it does.
Now, before we get into what those are, is this a fair and accurate copy of the way that that soccer field appeared to you on September 7th, 2018?
Yes, it does.
Your Honor, at this time, we move Exhibit 2 into evidence. And as I mentioned, I spoke with opposing counsel pre-trial. She stated that she does not have objection to that.
No objections, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Organ.
May I publish that on the screen again?
You may, Mr. Wallach. And for future reference, anything that you've agreed to in pretrial, you don't need to ask me to publish. You can just go ahead and do it, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, a moment ago, you said that you were on Burma Road when you heard the defendant yelling at Rory Street. Where on this map is Burma Road?
The Burma Road is in the red square on the map, and our regular soccer field is in the blue square.
And did Miss Street leave that blue square and come join you over on Burma Road?
Yes, she did.
Now, how did Miss Street appear to you at the start of that Burma Road drill?
At the start of the drill, she was already not looking great.
What exactly do you mean by that?
She was obviously sweating. It was really hot. She looked really tired and pale. She just didn't look good. She didn't look like her normal self.
Miss Saracen, when she was running the Burma Road drill and you noticed she wasn't looking good, at any point did the coach give her a break?
No.
Did Coach Taylor, the defendant, ever offer her any water?
No.
During this Burma Road drill, did the coach ever send the trainer over to take a look at her and see if she was okay?
No.
Between the time that she left the soccer field and joined you on Burma Road, did you ever see her take a break?
No.
Was she ever given water at that point?
No.
Finally, Miss Saracen, in between the Burma Road drill and that slide tackling drill, did you ever see the coach offer her a break?
No.
Did you ever see the coach offer her water?
No.
Did the coach ever have the trainer check up on her at that time?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, I have nothing further. I pass the witness.
25:10 remaining.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Organ, just give me 1 second to reset your clock, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, so 47. All right, ready for when you are, Mr. Organ.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Aubrey.
Morning.
My name is Olivia Dworkin, and I'm going to be asking you some questions on behalf of your coach, Taylor, okay? Now, I know this is probably a weird scenario for you, but if my audio cuts out or if at any time my video drops, just let me know, okay? Aubrey, I'd like to start by talking about your time on the Waco High soccer team. You've been on that team for 4 years, right?
Yes.
And Coach Taylor has been your coach for all 4 of those years?
Yes.
And over those 4 years, you've had pretty successful seasons, is that right?
Yes.
And in order to have those successful seasons, you guys have to practice, is that right?
Yes.
And Coach Taylor, he's the one that runs those practices.
Yes.
Before September 7th, 2018, you never saw anyone get seriously injured at one of these practices, have you?
Objection, Your Honor. Bad character evidence may I be heard.
Pause the time, so go ahead.
Yes, Your Honor. This is a violation of Federal Rule of Evidence 404B, as it is improper character evidence. Ms. Dworkin is effectively using this for purposes of propensity, showing that nothing had ever happened before, so it was unlikely that anything would have happened to the players on this day in question. That's improper today, and it's really not something that this witness should even be allowed to testify to.
Ms. Dworkin.
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 404, you are prohibited from bringing in propensity evidence to prove that because something had happened in the past, it was likely that it would happen in the future or on the day in question. That's not what this testimony is going to show. Rather, one of the elements that the plaintiff has to prove is the foreseeability of Rory Street's death. Now, if allowed to continue with this line of testimony, I would establish that these practices are common. They happen all the time throughout the summer, and no one had ever been seriously injured or died during practices, which makes it less likely that this event that happened on September 7, 2018 was foreseeable to Coach Taylor. Furthermore, we're not alleging that because no one got injured in the past, no one got injured on September 7th. Quite contrary, Rory Street did get injured on September 7th. We're trying to show that there is a clear difference between what happened in the past and what happened on this day.
Okay,
Your Honor, if I may respond briefly.
Briefly.
Yes, Your Honor. If opposing counsel is indeed trying to use this as an exception to 404B for the purposes of knowledge or notice, then not only is this the wrong kind of evidence, but this is the wrong witness to produce this evidence on. We're talking about whether or not Ms. Street's death was foreseeable to the defendant in this case. Asking one of the players about whether it was foreseeable to her is improper. And moreover, Your Honor, if we're going to show notice, and that's really what opposing counsel is trying to get out, that's better done through the information that the coach was given about how extreme temperatures could affect his player, any sort of trainings that he may have had, but eliciting that sort of testimony on this witness's cross-examination is, again, improper character, and the court should exclude it.
Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
So you may continue, Ms. Dworkin.
Aubrey, I'll repeat my question. Before September 7th, 2018, you never saw anyone get seriously injured at a soccer practice, right?
They never died. No.
And that's right. Before September 7th, 2018, you've never seen anyone die at one of your soccer practices.
Correct. Yes.
And you yourself have never felt unsafe being at one of Coach Taylor's practices, right?
Sometimes I've felt unsafe.
Is it your testimony today that you would feel unsafe at practice?
Sometimes.
Aubrey, do you remember being deposed for today's case?
Yes.
You remember when an attorney asked you questions and you were told to answer those questions truthfully?
Yes.
And you did take an oath to tell those or to answer those questions truthfully to the best of your ability under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
And that's the same oath that you're under today?
Yes.
Aubrey, do you have your deposition in front of you?
I do.
And that's a fair copy of your deposition?
Yes.
If you turn to the back page, that's your signature on that deposition?
Yes.
And that signature, that was your promise to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth when you were asked these questions, right?
Yes.
Aubrey, you just told us that sometimes you felt unsafe during Coach Taylor's soccer practices. Could you please point out for us and give us a page number of where you told the attorney that you felt unsafe during practice?
I have no idea what page that's on. I'm sorry.
So it's not in there.
I don't think so, no.
Thank you, Aubrey. Now, I'd like to start talking about the practice on the day in question. You told us earlier that Coach Taylor was having you run Burma Road that day, right?
Yes.
And as you were running Burma Road, Coach Taylor sent Rory over to join you, right?
Yes.
And by the time Rory joined you, you had already been running Burma Road yourself for a while, right?
Yes.
And you were able to keep running Burma Road when Rory came over to join you.
I was.
At that point, you did not feel sick.
I did not feel sick, no.
You did not want a break.
I mean, I wanted a break. It's hard. It's a hard drill.
But you
Yeah.
didn't take one,
I couldn't.
and you were able to keep running.
I tried my best.
After a few minutes of running, you realized that Rory was turning pale, right?
Yes, she already didn't look good when she came over.
And just to be clear, that was after only a few minutes of running. Is that right?
No, that's not right. She'd been running for an hour of practice already.
After a few minutes of running Burma Road, excuse me.
Yes.
Now, just to be clear, when you realized this, you were standing right next to Rory. Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Flynn, would you publish Exhibit 2? I'm sorry, Exhibit, the one that we've already entered into evidence with the boxes. Thank you. Aubrey, when you were running Burma Road, which colored square were you in?
The red square.
And that's where you noticed that Rory was looking pale?
Yes, she was there with me.
And just to be clear, Coach Taylor was not standing in that red square?
No.
He was over by the blue rectangle, right?
Yes.
He was pretty far away?
About 20 yards, I'd say.
Now, Aubrey, when you were running next to Rory, Rory told you that she was feeling funny, right?
Yes.
But you never heard her say that she was feeling funny to Coach Taylor, right?
I never heard that, no.
And when she told you that, you were still standing in that red square?
Yes.
And Coach Taylor was still over by the blue rectangle?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Oh, Aubrey, you told us that she didn't tell Coach that she was feeling funny while she was running Burma Road. At some point, she went back to that blue rectangle, right?
Yes.
At that point, when she got closer to Coach Taylor, she still didn't tell Coach Taylor that she wasn't feeling well?
No.
She never said anything to Coach Taylor about how she was feeling.
No.
And when you noticed that Rory was looking pale, you didn't suggest that she should go see the trainer, did you?
No.
You didn't tell her to go get a drink of water?
No.
You and her actually both kept running, is that right?
Yes.
And that was until Rory got called over to start practicing slide tackles.
Yes.
Now, slide tackling, that's something that happens, you'd say, in every single soccer game, is that right?
Yes.
You'd agree with me that slide tackles, they're not usually dangerous, right?
They can be dangerous, but they're used a lot.
So that's a yes to my question. They're not usually dangerous.
Yes.
And you've actually practiced slide tackles before, right?
Yes.
And you practiced them with Coach Taylor.
Yes.
And before September 7th, 2018, no one had ever been seriously injured practicing a slide tackle with Coach Taylor. Is that right?
Not to my knowledge.
Before September 7th, 2018, no one had ever died practicing a slide tackle during practice?
No.
Oh, Aubrey, you were watching these drills from the sidelines, right?
Yes, I was running the Burma Road.
During these drills, did Rory ever tell Coach Taylor that she wasn't feeling well?
Not that I know of, no.
Did you hear anyone else on the field talk about how Rory didn't look good?
No, not that I heard.
You didn't talk with anyone else about how Rory was apparently looking really pale?
No, I was being punished. I was running.
You didn't hear anyone else comment about how Rory was looking?
No, I was, like you said, I was at a different field.
Aubrey, did you see when Rory collapsed?
Yes.
Now that collapse, it was sudden, wasn't it?
I mean, she'd been falling and falling and falling, and then ultimately she just didn't get back up.
So is that a yes to my question? It was sudden when she collapsed?
Yes.
You'd say that it was out of nowhere that she collapsed.
No, she'd been falling and she'd been struggling.
Is it your testimony today that it wasn't out of nowhere that she collapsed?
It was out of nowhere in the fact that she didn't get back up. It just seemed like she was able to get back up and then she wasn't.
So that's a yes to my question. You describe it as out of nowhere.
In a sense, yes.
Aubrey, before this drill started, did you think that Rory was going to die?
No.
Before this drill started, did you know that Rory Street had cocaine in her system?
No.
Aubrey, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why you might be here today. Last year, you were a full-time starting midfielder, is that right?
Yes.
And that means you didn't have to share the field with anybody.
Correct.
And that actually changed your senior year, is that right?
Yeah.
Your senior year, you had to share field time.
Yeah.
You had to share field time with Coach Taylor's daughter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And you thought that you were better than his daughter.
Yes.
And it upset you that Coach Taylor made you share your time with her.
Of course.
It's safe to say that you don't really like Coach Taylor, do you?
I don't particularly like him, no.
You think that you're smarter than he will ever be, is that right?
If I said yes.
You think that he's a bully?
Yes.
Aubrey, you haven't read any of Rory's medical reports, have you?
No.
Do you know what doctors have said about the cause of her death?
No.
Even so, you blame Coach Taylor for what happened to your friend.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
A brief redirect, if I may, Your Honor.
Yes, just give me 1 second to get all the time set up. So 36:40 remaining, Mr. Orkin. And just so y'all know, guys, I will be cutting y'all off hard. I'll give you a 5 and a 1 minute warning, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okie dokie. So you've got 25:10 left. Hold on. Okay, ready when you are, Mr. Wallet.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Saracen, I want to focus on something that opposing counsel brought up with you on cross-examination about any past danger from this slide tackling drill. Just to be clear, had that slide tackling drill ever been conducted in this manner before?
No.
When you said that no one had been injured before, were they being repeatedly slide tackled 15 times by every member of their team?
No.
When you said that no one had ever been killed doing a slide tackling drill before, did you mean that it was when there were 15 members of their team repeatedly slide tackling them?
Yes, that's what I meant.
I'm sorry, you meant that it was when that was happening, or it was not when that was happening?
I meant that no one had ever died during this drill because it had never been used before.
Okay, so this was the first time that this drill was ever being used.
Yes.
And what wound up happening to Miss Street as a result of this drill?
Her whole body just gave out. It seemed like her body just gave up.
Now, you were asked a few questions as well about your feelings towards Coach Taylor, the defendant in this case. Did sharing your starting spot on the varsity soccer team color your testimony at all today with regard to Coach Taylor's actions?
No, I can separate, my feelings towards my coach and what happened in this case.
Does your belief that Coach Taylor is a bully, does that change anything that he did or did not do on September 7th of 2018?
No, it doesn't change any of that.
Thank you, Ms. Saracen. Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time. May this witness be excused?
Yes, this witness may be excused. Unless you have anything else, Ms. Dorkin, are you good?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
23-21 remaining.
Thank you, Your Honor. And with that, the plaintiff has no further witnesses, and at this time, we rest our case.
Okay. Anything further from me, Ms. Dorkin?
Yes, Your Honor. Before we request a recess, at this time, the defense would request a Rule 52C motion for a judgment on partial findings. At this point, the plaintiff has not met their burden. They have produced insufficient evidence for you to reasonably find in their favor. They had the burden to show that Coach Taylor had a duty to Rory, that he breached that duty, and that that breach was the proximate cause of Rory's death. We take the most issue with the fact that the plaintiff has not demonstrated any evidence that this death was foreseeable to Coach Taylor, and as such, we cannot find in their favor.
Mr. Wallach, brief response.
Yes, Your Honor. This is certainly foreseeable that this death would have occurred, as was demonstrated through the testimony of the witness that just took the stand, Aubrey Saracen. She stated that it was clear as day when she was 60 yards away that Miss Street, the decedent, was struggling, that she looked pale, that she looked almost lifeless, that she had her hands on her hips, that she'd been knocked to the ground time and time again in a drill that was untested and hadn't been done before. It should have been clear to the coach, as it was clear to one of her teammates standing 60 feet away, that she was clearly struggling, and that if not that a death was going to occur, then at the very least, an injury was going to occur. It would have been foreseeable to the coach in this situation. The fact that he didn't do his job in making sure that this practice was stopped doesn't change the fact that he could have certainly known it would have happened. Once more, Your Honor, the expert witness testimony that was already pre-admitted into evidence and that I highlighted at the start of our case in chief stated that all of the injuries sustained by the decedent in this case were consistent with heat stroke, because it was a 105-degree day and she was being pushed to her limits. In this case, those are things that the soccer coach who'd been coaching for extensive periods of time, as Ms. Dorkin just mentioned on the cross-examination of this witness, would have known. As such, there is sufficient—
Cut you off, and Ms. Dorkin, if you have any brief reply to that, go ahead. Very brief, please.
I'll abide by your ruling, Your Honor. I just wanted to reiterate that opposing counsel did not prove that this was foreseeable to Coach Taylor. We've heard that these practices have been done in the past, that no one has ever been seriously injured, let alone died during a practice. And as such, there's no possible way that Coach Taylor was supposed to know that one of his team members would drop dead doing a drill that she's done many times in the past.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and deny it because I don't think it's necessarily that the result was foreseeable. It's that, that some harm would have been foreseeable as the burden that he has to uphold here. So the motion's denied.
Yes, Your Honor.
Your Honor, now that we've rested our case in chief, before the defense puts on their case, may we ask for a brief 5-minute recess?
Do you absolutely need it? We're on a pretty tight timeline here with the rule.
Not necessarily, Your Honor.
Do you need it? Okay, let's continue powering through if we can, just that way we get this thing done on time. I'm sorry about
Yes, Your Honor. Not a problem.
Your Honor. If I may just have a moment to set up for case in chief, Your Honor.
You take a minute to set up, but a full 5-minute break if we can avoid that. Anybody need to go to the bathroom or anything? That's fine. If we need to have a bathroom break, do y'all want a 2-minute bathroom break or something?
That would be great, Your Honor.
Go ahead. Sorry about that. Let's just.
Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor.
Alex back. Ms. Dorkin, do you need a few more minutes? Or are you feeling good to go?
No, Your Honor. The defense is ready to proceed.
Okay, and I'm just gonna shout this out real quick. I know nobody else has left the room. Are we good to start? If anybody, gosh, I don't know how you would respond to that if you're not here, but I'm assuming you're all still here. So
My second chair is here, Your Honor.
seeing thumbs up on the screen, so we're ready to rock and roll. Okay, Ms. Dorkin, whenever you're ready, you've got 3640 remaining.
Yes, Your Honor. Before we call our first witness to the stand, I would just like to take this opportunity to highlight one of the exhibits that has been pre-admitted. Opposing counsel has stipulated to its admissibility. This is Exhibit 19. It is a report written by, I'm sorry, Exhibit 18. This is a report written by Spencer London, specifically on, sorry, Mr. Flynn, would you please publish? Thank you. On the second page of this report, it reads, Rory Street's death was caused at least in part by the use of cocaine. And then at this time, Your Honor, opposing counsel and I have agreed before trial that Exhibit 20 is a learned treatise and both sides may read portions of it onto the record, though the exhibit is not to be entered into evidence. At this time, I would like to do that. And on Exhibit 20, page 3, it is discussing the exertional heat stroke risk factors. I would like to note that the last risk factor on that chart is drug abuse, and specifically one of the drugs listed on the factor spreadsheet is cocaine. And with that, Your Honor, we're ready to call our first witness.
You may do so.
At this time, the defense calls Reese Taylor to the stand.
Mr. Taylor.
Hello.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Sure, ma'am.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Reese Taylor.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a high school soccer coach.
Are you from Waco?
Yes, actually born and raised, spent my whole life here.
What high school do you teach soccer?
At Waco High.
And how long have you worked at Waco High?
So I've been at Waco High for about 6 years now, but I've been coaching for 2.5 decades.
2.5 decades. How many sports would you say that you've coached in that time?
Well, with being like high school athletics and being a health teacher, if we've got it, I coach it. Volleyball, soccer, most of the team sports. Haven't ever coached tennis. That's not in my wheelhouse, but most all the team sports I've had a chance of coaching.
The Waco High soccer team, has that team been successful since you became their coach?
Oh, absolutely. We've had winning seasons every year. One district a couple of times made it to South State semifinals. We've had a lot of success. We've had very talented players come through our program.
Mr. Taylor, was one of those talented players Rory Street?
Yes, was.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Rory Street's death. Were you working on September 7th, 2018?
Yes, I was the soccer coach at the time.
What were you all doing that day?
So that day I had them running full field scrimmage, and that way it's more of an immersive practice experience to get a feel for what a real game is like.
Around what time did your practice start that day?
So practices are towards the end of the school day, starting around 3:15, 3:30 is usually when we begin.
Mr. Taylor, do you remember how hot it was that day?
Texas in September is warm. It was definitely a hot day. I remember it was decently breezy that day, like most Waco afternoons are, but definitely warm, hot.
Why did you decide to practice when it was hot outside?
Well, yeah, for one, all the students have classes in the mornings and throughout the afternoon, but also, like I was saying, here in Central Texas, it gets really hot. And once we get into the game situation, it's also really hot during those games, and you're going for 45-minute halves. And so practicing in the afternoon is a great opportunity for the players to be conditioned and used to the heat. That way they're in the best shape possible once we get to the season.
And because they're out there practicing in the heat, are team members allowed to have water at these practices?
Absolutely. It's encouraged.
Do you have water available for them on the sidelines?
Yes, we do.
Mr. Taylor, bringing you back to the scrimmage that you were talking about, how would you say Rory was performing that day?
That day, not well. She really seemed like she was dogging it, out of position. She was sloppy with her passes, missing shots on the goal. Not the performance that you expect from one of your star athletes.
Did you try to tell her that she wasn't performing well?
Oh yeah, but despite my comments, she wasn't terribly receptive to the constructive criticisms, and frankly seemed like she was really just ignoring my coaching and blowing it off.
After Rory seemed to be ignoring your coaching, what did you decide to do?
I had her run the Burma Road.
And what is Burma Road?
So Burma Road is this tradition we've had at Waco High. It was a exercise that I ran even when I was playing back in high school. And what you do is you run about 30 yards across the field, you get the ball, dribble it, full speed, 30 yards again, shoot on the goal, and then you bear crawl back to the start and do it over.
Well, it sounds pretty tough. About how many players on your team have you seen actually complete the Burma Road?
All of them. I mean, at some point or another, everyone is going to be assigned to do the Burma Road. It's just one of those standard punishments. Like I said, we've been doing it for the past 30, 40 years, maybe even longer before I was there.
These players that you have on your soccer team, would you say that they're in pretty good shape?
I'm sure this is the best shape they've been in at any point in their lives. Yeah, I mean, especially for high school students that are athletes, that they were in top shape.
Mr. Taylor, to your knowledge, has anyone ever died after running the Burma Road?
No.
When you sent Rory to run Burma Road, did you notice anything unusual about her appearance?
Not that I can remember. No, nothing out of the ordinary. She still wasn't. Didn't seem like she's still taking it seriously, but nothing about how she looks. No.
Did she say anything to you about feeling bad?
She never once mentioned not feeling well.
Mr. Taylor, when you run these practices, do you have a trainer on the field with you?
Yes, we have Jess Merriweather. She's our trainer, and she was there.
And do you have that trainer on the field throughout the entirety of practice?
Yeah, of course, for the player safety, just in case anything happened or anybody needs to get checked out, we've got her there.
And at that point, did Rory ask to go see the trainer?
No, Rory never asked to go see the trainer.
Did she ever say that she needed a break?
Never asked for a break.
If Rory had said that she needed a break, would you have given her one?
Yes, I would have.
Mr. Taylor, after you sent Rory out to run Burma Road, what happened?
Like I said, she really didn't seem like she was taking it seriously, wasn't running the drill too hard, wasn't shooting on the goal well, really slow on the crawls back. So I had her come back to do a slide tackling drill.
What are slide tackles?
So a slide tackle is a defensive maneuver where the opposing player has the ball, and then you come in, and the goal is to hit the ball at their feet, to take the ball from them, or at least prevent them from dribbling past you.
Well, these slide tackles, do they happen in real games?
They happen in every single game, yes.
Because of that, do you practice these slide tackles at your practices often?
I would say, yeah. I mean, probably every day at practice, someone at least does a slide tackle. We've never done this drill specifically, but yeah, it's something that you see in the game. So it's something I want the players to be prepared and capable of both doing and avoiding.
During these slide tackles, did Rory ever ask you for a break?
She did not.
Did she ask for water?
No.
Did she say that she was feeling sick?
Nope, never said anything.
At that point, did she ask to see the trainer?
She did not ask to see the trainer.
During these slide tackles, how did Rory look to you?
Like outward appearance, she looked like Rory. She was doing the drill fine, dribbling the ball, hopping back up, getting back in position to do it over again. Nothing really stood out of the ordinary.
Did she look sick to you?
Not that I could tell, no.
Did she look unusually pale?
I don't recall her being unusually pale.
Did she look like she needed medical attention?
No.
If she had looked like she needed medical attention, would you have stopped the drill?
Absolutely. If any of my players were looking ill or sick, I would for sure stopped them, had them go see the trainer.
Mr. Taylor, to your knowledge, has anyone ever died after a slide tackle?
No, not to my knowledge.
No. Mr. Taylor, with the permission of the court, I'm going to show you some exhibits. Your Honor, may the witness look at exhibits 14 and 15 in the exhibit binder?
Absolutely.
And Mr. Taylor, if you could please locate exhibits 14 and 15 and let me know when you get there.
Just give me 1 second.
Absolutely.
All right, I've got the exhibits pulled up.
Wonderful. On exhibit 14, what does it say at the top left of that page?
It says McLennan County Medical Examiner's Office.
And what does exhibit 14 say that it is at the top?
It's an autopsy report for Rory Street.
Is this autopsy report, is it signed at the bottom?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance, as well as I think we're getting dangerously close to hearsay, and I'd like to tackle that now as well.
Okay, explain.
Your Honor, if I may.
Sorry.
Relevant evidence under Rule 401 is anything that makes a fact of matter in today's case more or less likely. If I may proffer what the exhibit says.
Sure.
Your Honor, on the second page of exhibit 14, the opinion of the chief medical examiner that looked at Rory's body said that they were unable to determine the cause of the sudden cardiac death that took place in this case. The fact that the chief medical examiner was unable to determine the cause and didn't mention heat stroke or heat exertion of any kind is certainly relevant to today's case. Furthermore, to respond to Mr. Wallach's hearsay objection, we believe that this document falls within an exception to hearsay under Rule 803.8. And by asking the witness these questions, I'm trying to lay the foundation that this document is a public record. It comes from the McLennan County Medical Examiner's Office. And furthermore, the authenticity of this document has been stipulated to, which we addressed during pretrial.
Mr. Wallach, very briefly respond to that.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, we've certainly stipulated that this is an authentic exhibit, but that certainly doesn't mean that it's admissible today. Opposing counsel is seeking to use 803.8 to admit this as a public record, but Your Honor, this witness is a school teacher who teaches soccer and health classes. He can't talk about whether or not this report is actually a public report that sets out the duties of the office or is under a legal investigation or authorized investigation to come up with the findings that are listed herein. Opposing counsel is essentially using him as a conduit for hearsay, and that's not something that this witness can talk about.
Ms. Dworkin, very quickly.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm not going to try to have Mr. Taylor talk about the actual contents of the document or try to make any sort of medical opinion that would certainly be outside of his expertise. Rather, we're laying the foundation that this is a public record.
If you could specifically respond to what Mr. Wallach said with respect to he doesn't have the knowledge to testify as to whether or not the tenets of 803A or 8, I think you're saying. Are met.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. 803.8 doesn't require for the witness who actually made the document to be the one to testify about it. the standard is that we just need to show that it's more likely than not that this document is what it purports to be and that it is a public record. There are no rules regarding what witness may lay that foundation, so long as we show sufficient evidence.
Okay, Mr. Wallach, very quickly.
Yes, Your Honor. While opposing counsel is correct that that is one of the prongs of 8038, that is 8038B. 8038A also requires that a witness be able to discuss in relation to the public record whether it was made in the process of a legally authorized investigation or while under a duty to report. There are several other factors, things that this witness just cannot testify to.
Excellent, Mr. Wallach. Mr. Workman gave you 2 seconds to say something about that.
Yes, Your Honor. If allowed to question this witness further, he would testify that on the second page of this document, it was signed by the Chief Medical Examiner, William Little, and it is this document is stipulated to be authentic, that it is what it purports to be. By signing this document, William Little has testified essentially that this document is authentic, that he was under a duty to report, and the heading at the top of this document shows that it is a public record coming from a public office, the McLennan County's Medical Examiner's Office.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and overrule the objection and allow this to come in. So let's.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Just to clarify, am I to understand that Exhibit 14 is now entered into evidence?
I think you have a little bit more of a prove up to do. I'm not sure, don't remember where you were, but I think you do. You are on the path.
Great, Your Honor. I just wanted to clarify your ruling.
Sure.
Mr. Taylor, what does Exhibit 14 say that it is on the top?
An autopsy report.
And is Exhibit 14 signed?
It is by William Little, Chief Medical Examiner, McLennan County, Texas.
And is that document dated?
Yes, September 8th, 2018.
And Your Honor, at this time, we would move to admit Exhibit 14 into evidence.
Any objections, Mr. Wallach? Just the same one, I'm assuming.
For the record, the same grounds, Your Honor.
Overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
Evidence.
And Mr. Taylor, before we talk about Exhibit 14, would you turn to Exhibit 15 for me?
Yes, ma'am.
This document, what does it say in the top left corner?
McLennan County Medical Examiner's Office.
And what does Exhibit 15 say that it is?
It is a toxicology report.
Exhibit 15, is that exhibit signed?
Yes, again by William Little.
And who is William Little according to the document?
The Chief Medical Examiner in McLennan County, Texas.
And is that document dated?
It is September 8th, 2018.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move to enter Exhibit 15 into evidence under the same grounds.
Mr. Wallach, any objection?
For the record, they would be the same grounds, Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to overrule that, and it's now admitted into evidence.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Flynn, could you please publish Exhibit 14 for us? Great. Turning to page 2 of that exhibit. Mr. Taylor, do you see an opinion stated there?
I do.
What is that opinion?
Opinion says, while the cause of death is listed above, we are unable to determine the cause of the sudden cardiac death that took place in this case.
And Mr. Flynn, if you would turn to Exhibit 15, please. Mr. Flynn, I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, do you see the toxicology report in front of you?
I do.
Would you tell us whether the cocaine test was positive or negative?
Yes, it says the test for cocaine returned a positive result.
Mr. Taylor, when Rory showed up to practice that day, did you know that she had cocaine in her system?
No, I did not.
If you had thought that she had drugs in her system, would you have allowed her to practice?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
All right, so you have 2231 remaining. Hold on one sec.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am. All right, and let's see, you've got 2321 remaining. Let's see. on that, but ready to proceed, Mr. Wallach, whenever you are.
Yes, Your Honor, not a problem. Now, Coach Taylor, I want to begin by talking about the role that you played in Miss Street's life. You were her soccer coach, right?
Yes.
And like you said on direct examination, you coached her on the varsity team for several years.
Yes.
She trusted you, didn't she?
I assume so.
Now, you believed you had a healthy coach-player relationship, right?
Yes.
Besides just being a coach, you also teach, don't you, sir?
Yeah, I'm a health teacher.
And in order to become a health teacher, you got a degree, didn't you?
Yes,
You got a degree in physical education.
that's correct.
And presumably, as a health teacher, you know about bodily health, right?
Yeah, I'd say I do.
As you mentioned, you've also coached for more than 20 years.
That's correct.
Now, as a coach of multiple different sports, you know that there are rules to those games, right?
Yes.
Coach, you'd also agree with me that there are rules to the way that you conduct practices, aren't there?
Yeah, we have structured practices. Yes.
There are certain things that you have to do in order to keep your players safe.
Yes.
You would agree that there are guidelines and best practices on how to do this.
Yeah, sure.
And you would agree with me that you attend training seminars so that you can learn about these practices.
Yes, I do.
Now, just 2.5 months prior to Miss Street's death, you actually went to one of those sort of seminars or conferences, didn't you?
I did.
And that was the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association that held that seminar, right?
Correct.
There was a PowerPoint that was shown to you at that meeting,
There was.
and you were put on notice of all the information contained therein.
Yeah, I watched the presentation.
Now, you have a copy of that PowerPoint, don't you? Exhibit 11.
Yes, sir.
Can you go ahead and take a look at that for me?
Yep, I got it up.
Now, sir, you are familiar with that document, aren't you?
Yes.
That's an exact copy of the PowerPoint slides that you were shown at that presentation in June 2018.
That is correct.
And you would agree that that's a fair and accurate copy of the way those slides were presented to you.
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I offer Exhibit 11 into evidence.
Mr. Organ, any objection?
Objection, Your Honor, to hearsay.
Give me 1 second, pause the timer.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed, Mr. Organ.
Your Honor, under Rule 801, this is an out-of-court statement that Mr. Wallach is now bringing into court to prove the truth of the matter asserted, and as such, it is barred under Rule 802.
Mr. Wallach?
Yes, Your Honor. We're actually not introducing this to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Instead, we're going to show the existence of these statements and that the coach was aware of them. Specifically, I just questioned the witness a moment ago about whether or not these statements that he saw provided notice about the best practices that he should have undertaken. And he said that they did provide him notice. That's the purpose that we're using them for today, is notice, not the truth in the slides, but that he knew what he was supposed to be doing.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Absolutely.
We do believe, based on Mr. Wallach's previous questions about best practices and standards and rules, that Mr. Wallach is actually going to try to use Exhibit 11 to prove that the statements within that document are the best practices and that Mr. Taylor had a duty to follow what was stated within that document. They're not only going to show that he had knowledge that this PowerPoint existed, but rather they're using the truth of those statements within the document to prove that those are the best practices and that Mr. Taylor should have been following them.
Mr. Wallach, very briefly respond.
Your Honor, again, this goes to notice about those practices. This witness can testify that he was aware of these statements, that he saw this presentation, and that he was made aware that there are certain practices taken by Texas high school soccer coaches that need to be followed. He'll also be able to talk about, in further testimony, the actions he took on the day in question and how they contrasted with what was given to him just 2 months prior.
Okay, here's my ruling. let's avoid any testimony with respect to whether or not these are in fact the best practices, because I think Mr. Workin has a point.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm going to, overrule the objection insofar as Mr. Taylor's testimony is limited to, was he aware of what was taught at the seminar? And you're free to contrast those actions, but do not elicit any testimony with respect to, are those in fact the best practices? And Mr. Workin, feel free to re-raise that objection if he starts heading that direction, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Give me one timer going, hold on. Oh, sorry, what was that, Mr. Wallach, last thing?
Just to clarify then, is Exhibit 11 now in evidence, Your Honor?
It's admitted.
And may I publish?
Absolutely, you don't need to ask. Once it's submitted, you can publish.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Coach, I want us to take a look at this PowerPoint presentation here. Looking down at the date right below the title of the association, it says June 15th, 2018. That was 2.5 months before Miss Street died, wasn't it?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, now let's take a look at the second page of these slides you were shown. The title at the top says Practicing in the Heat, right?
Yes.
Now, as a health teacher and a coach of 2.5 decades, you know that it's dangerous to practice in extreme heat, don't you?
Sure. Yeah.
And this PowerPoint here, it's sort of confirmed that, didn't it?
Yeah, it discusses practicing in the heat.
The first part discusses what you might do when the heat is between 96 to 99 degrees, right?
I agree with what you said. It's what you might do. Yes.
Right. And below that, it also talks about what you might do when there's temperatures above 100 degrees.
Yes, what you might do. Yes.
Now, each of these segments discuss breaks that you might take.
That is true.
It discusses how long breaks should be.
Yeah.
It also mentions in this PowerPoint how often breaks should be taken when temperatures are that high.
It does.
It says that breaks should be taken in the shade if possible.
If possible, yeah.
I'm now going to put Exhibit 2 up on the screen for you to take a look at, Coach. This is the soccer field where you practice, isn't it?
That's correct.
And this is how it looked on September 7th, 2018?
I believe so, yeah.
Just to be clear, on September 7th, 2018, no trees anywhere nearby, right?
No trees on our soccer field.
At the time in September, no tents that were put out for shade.
Nope.
In fact, sir, you would agree with me that there's not really any shade anywhere on that field.
Typically, there aren't shade in the middle of a soccer field, yeah.
But even nearby on the outside, there's no shade around there.
Nope.
Okay, let's go back to Exhibit 11 for just a moment. I want to talk about what it says, how long those breaks might be. In 96 to 99 degree temperature, breaks should happen every 30 minutes. That's what it says in here, right?
That is what it says.
And it also says that when temperatures are over 100 degrees, there's supposed to be a break every 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's what it recommends here.
Mr. Taylor, did you realize on September 7th, 2018, that it was 105 degrees at that practice?
I don't think I could have told you the exact temperature, no.
But certainly you realized it was extremely hot, right?
Yeah, as most afternoons are in September.
Thank you, Mrs. Au. You can stop sharing that screen now. Now, Coach, I want to move on to the actual events that happened on September 7th, 2018. You were frustrated with Miss Street that day, weren't you?
I wasn't thrilled that she wasn't giving it her all, yeah.
You thought that she was goofing off, right?
Yeah, she was really dogging it.
You also thought she wasn't listening to you.
I know she wasn't listening to me.
You said she was being lazy.
Yeah.
And Coach Taylor, this upset you, didn't it?
It's very upsetting when players aren't maximizing their potential or listening to your criticisms.
Yeah, in your own words, you say, nothing gets your heat up like a player that doesn't follow directions.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what you did when you were upset at Miss Street. You wanted to punish her, didn't you?
Yeah, to get her attention and tell her that she needed to take it seriously.
And you wanted to punish her in front of the whole team.
Yeah,
You'd agree that you can't win games without a disciplined and focused team.
that's absolutely correct.
So let's discuss then how you punished her. The first thing you did was pull Miss Street off of that main field, right?
For the Burma Road, yeah.
Yeah, and Burma Road, like we've heard today, part of that requires running 30 yards of sprints, right?
Yes,
And then you run as you dribble a ball another 30 yards.
correct.
Then you shoot on a goal, right?
That's right.
And after that, you have to bear crawl all 60 yards back.
Yes,
And when you got to where you started, you get up and you do it over again.
correct.
On this day, she was doing that in 100+ degree heat, right?
Yeah, sure.
Well, we certainly know that it was at least extremely hot, don't we, Coach?
Yeah, it was hot.
And like you said a moment ago, there wasn't any shade around.
There was not.
Now, when you pulled Miss Street off of the field for the first time, between that point and having her run Burma Road, you didn't give her a 5-minute break at that point.
No, she didn't ask for any breaks or anything, no.
But regardless of what she asked for, you didn't tell her to go take a break.
No, I told her to run the Burma Road.
And when she was running Burma Road, you didn't stop her in the middle and give her a break at any point then.
No.
Coach Taylor, you can't even tell us how many times you made her run Burma Road.
No.
You can't tell us for how long she was practicing over there running Burma Road.
Nope.
What you can tell us is that her exercise over on Burma Road, that just wasn't enough for you, was it?
She didn't seem like she was taking it seriously either.
You still thought she was, to use your word, dogging it?
She was dogging it.
Okay, so you came up with a new punishment, didn't you?
A drill, yeah.
A new drill you'd never done before.
I'd never done the exact drill, no.
So let's talk about what you did for the first time on the day that Miss Street died. You made this teenage girl stand in the middle of the soccer field.
Yes,
You had her teammates line up about 10 yards in front of her.
correct.
And then she had to dribble a ball up towards where those teammates were standing.
That is true.
Then one at a time, those girls would try to attack that ball.
Slide tackle, yeah.
Yeah, and the slide tackle, like we've heard today, involves running, sliding on the ground, and trying to get the ball away from the person's feet.
Yes.
So first it was just one player in the line, right?
Yeah, one at a time.
And then you moved on to the next player,
Yep.
and the next,
And then the next.
and so on and so forth, right, Coach Taylor?
That is correct.
A total of 15 times.
Yes.
Again, just so we're doing that drill in extreme heat.
You cut out for a second there. Can you repeat the question?
I'm sorry, I said, just so we're clear, you were doing that drill in extreme heat.
Yeah, the heat hadn't changed.
You were doing that drill still with no shade in the area.
That is correct.
And between having Miss Street run Burma Road and then having her teammates slide tackle her, you never told her to go take a break.
No,
In the middle of that drill, you never told her to go take a break.
no.
She wasn't offered water at any point.
No, she never asked for anything.
And today you're claiming that this behavior gave you no idea that it would injure Miss Street.
Her behavior or
The drill that was going on, the disciplinary behavior that you were giving.
no, not, especially not what ultimately happened to her.
In fact, you said on direct examination you had no idea that she was too hot.
No,
You also said you had no idea that she was about to die.
I don't think anyone there did.
Coach, you do admit that Miss Street was acting differently that day, right?
She wasn't performing as well as she normally did.
That's right. She was slower.
Yes.
She was missing shots.
Yeah.
And by the time you lined her up for that slide tackle drill, You would say that she was visibly struggling.
Looked like she was goofing around, not taking things serious. I don't know about struggling per se.
I'm talking about when this slide tackling drill was going on. During that slide tackling drill, you would agree that she was visibly struggling, wouldn't you?
Oh, it was a tough drill, sure.
You saw that she had fallen on the ground several times.
It's typically what happens in a slide tackle.
And every time she got back up, you directed another one of her teammates to slide tackle her again,
That is correct.
sending her back to the floor.
Yep.
And you made her keep going despite seeing that she was visibly struggling.
Yeah, I didn't have her stop.
Because to use your own words, Coach Taylor, Miss Street's struggling was kind of the point, wasn't it?
To get her attention, sure. Make a statement to the whole team.
And those are your words that I'm using, right? That her struggling was the point of that drill.
Yes, it's a difficult, intentionally difficult drill.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I pass the witness.
10:05 remaining. Ms. Dorkin, just
Direct examination, Your Honor.
give you 2 seconds just to reset your clock.
Absolutely.
$22.31 remaining, and we're ready when you are, Ms. Dorkin.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Taylor, Mr. Wallach just asked you some questions about how you noticed that Rory Street was struggling that day. Can you explain what you meant when you said you thought she was struggling?
Yeah, so the slide tackling drill was a difficult drill. It's not, something, I didn't ask her to do something easy as this this drill to show the team that even the best players need to take practice seriously. Slide tackling, that type of encounter is something you see in the game. It's not easy to avoid, and it's a great learning opportunity to see how for the people practicing the drill to learn how to do it appropriately. And yes, for her to show the team that even the best players need to take it seriously.
Mr. Taylor, did you think that Rory was struggling to the point of needing medical attention?
No, not struggling in that sense, not struggling for like her life.
And if you had thought that she looked like she was struggling for her life, would you have stopped the drill?
Absolutely.
Mr. Taylor, Mr. Wallach also showed you a slideshow presentation from one of those clinics that you attended. At that presentation, did anyone ever tell you that these rules were mandatory?
Those rules aren't mandatory. That's I believe it's the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association. Those aren't like laws or anything. They're not mandatory rules.
Did you understand those rules to be best practices?
That's just what the association recommendations.
And on that slideshow presentation, it talks about practicing in the heat. Mr. Taylor, how long have you lived in Texas?
Like I said, born and raised.
And in the summer, how many days are hot?
All of them.
Can you avoid playing soccer in the summer in the heat?
There's no option besides playing in the heat during the summer.
Thank you. I have no further questions. And at this time, I would just ask that Mr. Taylor be excused.
Is that good with you, Mr. Wallach?
Yes, I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Mr. Taylor, you're excused. Mr. Morgan, you have 20 minutes and 3 seconds remaining on your time.
Yes, Your Honor.
Anything?
At this time, Your Honor, we would like to call Jess Merriweather by deposition. If I could have Mr. Flynn read the lines. Opposing counsel has stipulated that this witness is unavailable and is able to be called by deposition.
Sounds
That's
good.
correct, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Wallach. And Ms. Dorkin, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Hello there. My name is Jess Merriweather.
How old are you, Jess?
I'm 28 years old.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas here.
How long have you lived in Waco?
Just a couple of years now. I grew up in Houston, then I went to Texas A&M for undergrad, and then I got a master's degree in sports training from A&M as well. After that, I worked for a couple years at another high school in College Station before I got a job at Waco High.
And what is your job at Waco High?
I am an athletic trainer, and I also teach health.
What is the job of an athletic trainer at a high school?
We have various teams and activities at the school that involve some level of physical activity and competition. Everything from football to soccer to volleyball to cheerleading and drill team. As a trainer, I work with the students that participate in those activities to keep them healthy and in shape, and to treat any injuries that they have.
Do you attend practices?
Yes. Depending on what time of year it is, it may be football or soccer or something else, but there is always a trainer at any official practice for our various athletic teams.
How long have you been an athletic trainer?
About 2 years now.
Skipping ahead to line 24 on that same page, are you familiar with Coach Reese Taylor, excuse me?
I am.
Who is Coach Taylor?
Coach Taylor is the varsity soccer coach at Waco High.
Have you worked with Coach Taylor?
I have.
In what capacity?
As a trainer. So I've attended soccer practices and soccer games where Coach Taylor was the coach. I've worked with Coach Taylor in order to treat injured players, and I've worked with Coach Taylor just overseeing the students during practices and games.
And skipping ahead to line 18 on that same page, do you know who Rory Street was?
Yeah, I knew Rory. Very sad what happened.
How did you know Rory?
Well, she was a varsity soccer player, so I worked with her as a trainer for the varsity soccer team, just like any other player.
Now skipping ahead to that next page, page 5, and line 15. What about cocaine? How does that affect an athlete?
Cocaine is particularly dangerous. It killed Len Bias and Don Rogers. Diego Maradona had a 20-year addiction that derailed his career. Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden also come to mind.
Skipping ahead to page 8, line 8. Were you at practice the day that Rory died?
I was.
Skipping to line 18. At any time, did you see Rory stumbling, faltering, or slowing down in a way that would have indicated that she was in trouble?
No, not at all.
Was Rory sweating hard?
I mean, yes, but everyone was, including me. It was a really hot day.
Did Rory ever say anything to you about feeling bad that day?
Nope, never said anything to me. And here's the thing. I'm there to take care of those players and they know it. I'm kind of a combination trainer and guardian to the team. So they trust me and I trust them to tell me if something is wrong or if they're hurting. Rory didn't say a word, and she would have. Rory was a tough kid, but she knew her limits and would let me coach let me or coach know when she needed water.
Are players allowed to get water when they need it or want it?
Yes, all they have to do is ask, even if we're not on a water break.
Skipping ahead to line 21 on that same page. Based on your knowledge and experience in the field of physical education and sports training, do you think the Coach Taylor's means of disciplining Rory Streets on the day in question were reasonable or appropriate?
I don't think they were unusual at all. Coach Taylor is a winning coach that pushes players, but Coach Taylor is also concerned about players' safety. We talk about it all the time. So I would term Coach Taylor's conduct and approach to discipline as orthodox in every sense of the word.
Thank you. That's all I was planning on reading at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, 15 and a half minutes remaining, Mr. Workin. Anything further, Mr. Workin? Are we ready to proceed?
As long as Mr. Wallach wasn't planning on reading any further lines from the deposition, we would rest our case in chief.
Mr. Wallach?
I'm not going to read anything further, Your Honor.
Okay.
And Your Honor, at this time, we would just like to re-raise for the record our Rule 52C motion for a judgment on partial findings. if I may be heard briefly.
Very briefly.
As of now, we have demonstrated evidence that Rory was partially to blame for what happened to her. And in the state of Texas, if you find that Rory Street is more than 50% responsible for her death, Coach Taylor cannot be found liable. I believe that we have presented enough evidence to show that Rory Street was more than 50% responsible for what happened to her. And as such, we believe a Rule 52C motion is appropriate.
Mr. Wallach, very briefly respond to that.
Your Honor, I would rest on the same grounds as our previous response in this case.
Okay, I'm going to deny the 52C motion.
Yes, Your Honor. And with that, we do rest our case in chief and just request maybe a 1 or 2 minute break to set up for closing arguments.
That's fine by me. Everybody go run to the bathroom, but let's try to get this done in the next 30 minutes or so, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'll wait for y'all to be back on camera before we start if y'all need to run out, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And Your Honor, before we resume trial, may I take a brief moment to set up for my closing argument?
Oh, yes, please. That's what y'all should be doing now. If you can go ahead and take care of that now, let's get everybody set up. Mr. Orkin, if you want to take this pause too, first, but if you want to go ahead and you got any further I'm about to do, if you don't mind doing it now, that way we can just seamlessly bounce over to you if that's okay. And I'll just wait for y'all both to holler and say we're ready to go, okay?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm ready to proceed.
Mr. Orkin, you ready?
I'm ready to proceed as well.
May I, Your Honor?
Just 1 second, let me get the timer up. So you got 10 minutes and 5 seconds left, okay?
Yes, sir. And with regard to the time signals that you had mentioned previously, what will those be?
Okay, so I think I'm just going to give y'all 5 and 1. Is that fine? So I'll just give you a 5. I can or if y'all want, do y'all want by the minute? I don't mind doing that. Do you want me to try to give you minute signals and we'll go down to 1? I'll give you a 30-second warning like this. And then I'm going to pipe up and say you're done. And they are asking me to hold y'all to a tight timeline. So I will cut you off, okay?
Yes, Your Honor. And simply for the purposes of the record, before I begin my closing argument, I'd like to reserve any time remaining at the end for my rebuttal argument.
Perfect.
May I proceed at this point?
Let me pull up the timer real quick and then you're ready to go. Go ahead. Sorry.
She didn't stand a chance. Rory Street, this 18-year-old girl full of life with her entire future ahead of her, she never stood a chance. Not in 105-degree weather with the defendant barking orders and screaming down her neck. After almost 2 hours of strenuous soccer practice in over 100-degree heat, the defendant, he changed his role from soccer coach to drill sergeant, turned that soccer field into a battlefield. He no longer wanted to help Rory Street become a better soccer player. You heard it from himself. He wanted to discipline her. And those are the defendant's words, not mine. He wanted to discipline her in front of his entire team. Because you can't win if the entire team doesn't see what can happen when you don't listen. When treating Rory Street like an animal and making her do a bear crawl on Burma Road didn't satisfy the defendant, he turned that discipline into punishment. He turned his battlefield into an experiment. By punishing Rory Street and making her do that brand new drill this man who'd been coaching for 2.5 decades had never run before, he made Rory Street's life end. He forced her teammates and friends to line up in a row like a shooting gallery, and one by one ordered them to slide tackle her legs to try and get the ball away. Time after time, you heard that she was knocked to the ground until she couldn't get up again. That girl died because the defendant wanted to win at all costs. But winning at all costs doesn't justify that behavior. Winning at all costs doesn't justify pushing those teenage soccer girls to the brink. Winning at all costs has a limit to how expensive that cost can be. And Rory Street's life is way too high a price. The defendant's actions and conduct killed Rory Street, and that's not winning. That's negligence. We've proven that today. Now, we had to answer 3 questions in this case today. As Your Honor is aware, in fact, there are 2 questions that we needed to answer today. The first question defines negligence and provides guidance as to what we had to show throughout our case. We had to show you that the defendant failed to use ordinary care, meaning that the defendant did not use the type of care someone of ordinary prudence in similar circumstances would have used. We had to show that the defendant's conduct was the proximate cause of Rory Street's death. That without the defendant's conduct, but for that conduct, Rory Street would be alive. And finally, we had to show that Rory's death was foreseeable to the defendant. These elements are abundantly clear when we review the 3 points I brought up at the beginning of today's case. First, that Rory and her mother, they trusted the coach. Second, the defendant broke the rules and he broke that trust. And third, Your Honor, that the defendant's actions cost Miss Street her life. So let's turn to that first point, that Miss Street and her mother, they trusted that defendant as a coach. Now, frankly, they had no reason not to. We heard all about the coach's certifications today and why he should have been a coach. He'd been coaching for more than 2.5 decades. He's got a college degree in physical education and understands bodily health. He's been doing this for so long. He's practically a veteran on any field. If you can name a sport, he's played it. So of course, Miss Street thought her daughter would be okay when she dropped her off at the school on September 7th, 2018. Of course, Miss Street trusted him to help make Rory a better soccer player. He was the adult, the one with experience, the one who was supposed to protect Rory Street, not punish her. Now, today, you heard the defense try to point the finger at Rory Street instead. Ms. Dworkin wanted you to ignore the behavior of this grown man who's been coaching for almost as long as I've been alive, and instead blamed the teenage girl for her own conduct, for not asking to take a break, for not asking to say she needed water, or speaking up and saying that she's too hot. They want you to think that anything that may have been in her system that day somehow excuses the behavior of the defendant. But Your Honor, frankly, how dare they say all that? How dare they blame a teenage girl? Is it really her responsibility to tell her coach that she needs to drink water in 105-degree heat after being treated like an animal and doing bear crawls up and down the field for who knows how long? Can we really expect a teenage girl to ask for a break when her coach, the man that she trusted, had turned her teammates against her, lining up one by one to attack her? Your Honor, of course we can. That defies common sense. How else do we know that the defendant failed to use ordinary care today? Because there are guidelines for coaches. Now, Coach Taylor got on the stand and told you these rules, they're not mandatory. They can be broken. But nonetheless, he admits that he was familiar with each and every one of these rules. He knew they existed because both his education and experience, and also because he was reminded of them just 2.5 months before Miss Street died. Practicing in the heat, the defendant saw this slide just weeks before Miss Street passed away. And it reminded him that it's dangerous to practice in Waco's heat, as if we all don't already know that. Anyway, the defendant was supposed to give these girls breaks. The 30-minute break when it's 96 to 99, that's recommended. When it's more than 100 degrees, the recommended break is 5 minutes for every 15 minutes of play. Did he do that? No. Today, he kept telling you that he didn't give them a break because Rory didn't ask for it. It doesn't say on this slide that the teenage girls need to ask for a break. It doesn't say they have to have the courage to ask for water to get it. While Coach Taylor says these rules can be broken, they're pretty clear. It says practice must include a break. Must is mandatory, no discretion there, which is why the defendant's conduct, it's definitely not ordinary. That brings me to my second point today. The defendant broke Rory Street and her mother's trust when he broke those rules. Now, Your Honor, you have that weather report. You can see that with each minute that passes, the heat, it gets higher and higher and higher. It became a more dangerous environment for each of those players. And yet the coach continued to push. Practice starts at 3:15 p.m. and it's already over 100 degrees outside. About 1 degree per hour, it goes up from there, with each drill that the defendant did requiring Miss Street to be pushed to her limit. First, she has to run Burma Road, and then a brand new drill that Coach Taylor told you he was using to punish her, all while the heat climbs higher and higher, up to 105 degrees. Now, you may be asking yourself, why? What happened that day? Why all of a sudden did the defendant snap? Why suddenly did he want her to be pushed further and further and further? Your Honor, he wanted to punish her because it's winning at all costs for him. And that's the final point today. That winning at all costs was the defendant's driving motivator, and that winning at all costs meant that he couldn't have someone acting lazy on his team. The price of winning at all costs was Rory Street's life. And as such, I ask that you find the defendant liable.
22 seconds remaining for Wallach.
Closing argument for the defense, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am. Just 1 second. Let me set your time. I've got 15.5 minutes left. You can begin whenever you're ready, Ms. Working.
Yes, Your Honor. May it please the court. You can't prevent what you can't predict. On September 7, 2018, Coach Taylor showed up for soccer practice at Waco High, just like he had been doing for the past 6 years. The team was running a scrimmage that day, getting ready for their competitive season that was starting in the fall. Right away, Coach Taylor noticed that something was off with his star player. The star player, Rory, she was dropping the ball, quite literally. She was missing passes, wasn't scoring at wide open goals, wasn't running in the right positions. Coach tried to fix her performance, but Rory wasn't listening to any of his criticisms. She continued to make mistakes. At that point, Coach treated Rory just like any other team member on Waco High who was dogging it. He sent her to run sprints on Burma Road, a tradition stemming back to the 1990s, back when Coach Taylor himself was a soccer star at Waco High. At this point, when Rory went to go run Burma Road, she had not asked for a break, had not asked for water, and had not said she wasn't feeling well. When Coach saw Rory out there and thought that she wasn't taking Burma Road seriously, he decided to change course and have her practice slide drills instead. Now at this point, Rory did not ask for a break, did not ask for water, did not say that she wasn't feeling well. Rory went right on over to the main field and started to practice her slide tackles, a common maneuver in a soccer game. And each time she fell down, she got right back up, ready to go again. Throughout these drills, Rory did not ask for a break, did not ask for water, did not say she wasn't feeling well. All of a sudden, Rory dropped. Everyone on the field stood in shock at what they had just witnessed. Make no mistake, as the defense, we are not here today claiming that Rory Street's death is not a tragedy. But the plaintiff is here today accusing Coach Reese Taylor of causing that death and claiming that that death was foreseeable. And your job is to put emotion aside and determine whether or not that's true. Now, as I stated at the beginning of trial, in blaming Coach Taylor for causing Rory Street's death, they've assumed that burden of proof. Now, as you know, this means that they had to prove each and every element of their claim by a preponderance of the evidence. They had to prove that Mr. Taylor owed a duty to Rory, that Mr. Taylor breached that duty of care, and that that breach was the proximate cause of her death. If they fail to prove just one of those elements by a preponderance of the evidence, you cannot find Coach Taylor liable. And the plaintiff failed to meet that burden today. To prove this, let's walk through these elements one by one. Now, as the defense, we don't contest that Mr. Taylor owed a duty to Rory. What we do contest is that he breached that duty. Now, throughout all of trial, you heard all about Coach Taylor's practices. You know that they're tough, but they're fair. Rory wasn't treated like an animal. She was told to sprint at a soccer practice. A soccer game involves sprinting throughout the entire course of the game. She was told to dribble the ball, something that she has to do throughout the course of the entire game. Your Honor, you heard from 2 witnesses today that there's water available at all times for anyone who needs it. And there's a trainer on site for the entirety of practice in case anyone is injured, anyone feels sick, or anyone just needs a break or needs medical advice. And players are permitted to take breaks as needed. And coach even mandates breaks every so often to give players some rest. Now, the plaintiff would have you believe that Coach Taylor somehow breached his duty of care by making Rory run Burma Road. But you heard today that running Burma Road is a tradition that has been going on for the past 20 years. You heard that players run Burma Road every single day, sometimes multiple times per week, and that players have been running Burma Road every single day for the past 20 years. In those 20 years, no one has ever been seriously injured running Burma Road, and certainly no one has ever dropped dead after running Burma Road. In fact, the plaintiff even called a witness today, Aubrey, and she took the stand and she said that very same day, in the very same heat, she herself was running Burma Road next to Rory. She felt fine. She even ran Burma Road longer than Rory. She continued to run Burma Road even after Rory left and went back to the main field. She didn't feel sick. She didn't say that she needed a break. She didn't grab a sip of water. Aubrey was fine. But the plaintiff would also have you believe that Coach Taylor breached his duty of care by making Rory practice slide tackles. But you heard today about how common slide tackles are in soccer. Aubrey's heard of them. She's practiced them. Coach Taylor practiced them when he was in high school. He's heard of them. Even Rory's mother, a soccer star in her day, has practiced slide tackles. Your Honor, not practicing slide tackles because someone might get hurt during it would be like sending a boxer into the ring without ever practicing being hit. It just wouldn't happen. Now, Mr. Wallach tried to say that Coach Taylor breached his duty of care because he didn't follow some guidelines that were listed on a slideshow presentation at one of the clinics that he went to. Mr. Taylor was never told that those recommendations were mandatory. We didn't even hear from the witness who created that slideshow to talk about how they came up with those standards. Your Honor, it's Waco, Texas. It is hot every single day of the summer. It's likely that every single day of the summer, these players are going to have to practice in 94 to 100-degree weather. And when they're playing a real game, they certainly don't get a full 5-minute break every single 15 minutes. We're not saying that Coach Taylor is perfect. We're not saying that he's the nicest or the best coach in Texas, but he doesn't have to be. The law doesn't say that you cannot discipline your team members. The law doesn't say that you cannot run drills. The law doesn't say that you cannot practice in Waco, Texas when it's hot outside. Just that you have to be reasonable when you do. Now, Coach Taylor is not on trial for being mean. He's not on trial for yelling at his team members. He's not on trial for hurting people's feelings. He is on trial for causing the death of another person. The plaintiff failed to meet their burden here. But even if you do believe that Mr. Taylor breached his duty of care to Rory, the plaintiff had even more to prove. They had to prove that that breach was the proximate cause of Rory's death. That means that not only did they have to show that Rory's death would not have happened if not for Mr. Taylor's actions, but they had to prove that Rory's death was foreseeable to Mr. Taylor. Your Honor, in front of you, you're going to have the autopsy report of Rory Street. And on that autopsy report, you'll see that the chief medical examiner examined Rory's body on the day that she died. And after a thorough and complete examination, you know what his opinion was? His opinion was that he was unable to determine the cause of the sudden cardiac death that took place in this case. Now, the plaintiff tried to say that the cause of death was a heat stroke by introducing an expert report from a witness that they didn't call to the stand. But we also showed you a different expert report that had a different opinion on it. And that expert report said that Rory's death was caused, at least in part, by the use of cocaine. At the very least, these two experts disagree with each other, and that's not enough to meet their burden. In the event, you're going to have in front of you when you go to deliberate an excerpt that we read from a treatise on heat stroke. And that excerpt says that heat stroke is only causes mortality in less than 5% of the time. And one of those risk factors is drug abuse. One of those drugs listed on that chart is cocaine. And you heard today that Rory had cocaine in her system at the time that she died. Your Honor, how are we supposed to know that Rory, a star soccer player in peak physical condition, falls within the 5% of people that die as a result of heat stroke? But even if you do believe that her death was caused by heat stroke, the plaintiff still had to prove that her death was foreseeable. I can't stress this enough. The drills that Coach Taylor were running were extremely common. Players run this drill every single day. Players have been running this drill every day since the 1990s. No player has ever gotten seriously injured during this drill or dropped dead as a result of running Burma Road. Even Aubrey said that Rory's death was sudden and out of nowhere. She took the stand today and she tried to tell you that Rory looked sick, that she looked pale. She is the only person at trial that said that. Now, Aubrey, she's a teenager. She's not a trained professional. She's not someone with years of experience. She's never been a coach. She's never been a trainer. She's a teenager with a grudge against Coach Taylor. But we called two witnesses to the stand today, both of them with years of experience, both of them trained professionals, both of them teach health classes and watch athletes every single day for a living. Neither of them thought that Rory looked sick, that she looked pale, that she looked like she needed medical attention. Who are you going to believe? We agree that it was hot outside that day, but isn't it always in Waco in the summers? These players were not strangers to playing outside in the heat. And heat stroke only causes death in less than 5% of cases, and even less than that for healthy and fit young athletes. Coach Taylor had no idea what Rory was experiencing. She never asked for a break, never asked for a sip of water, never said she wasn't feeling well. She kept getting back up. From the moment she started her drills to the moment she collapsed, she never voiced how she was feeling. The plaintiff failed to meet their burden here, but even if you believe that what happened to Rory was somehow foreseeable, the plaintiff had even more to prove to you. Because as we know in the state of Texas, if someone is more than 50% to blame for their own death, the person at the other end of that wrongful death suit is not liable. This means that if you find that Rory was more than 50% responsible for her death, Coach Taylor cannot be held responsible for what happened to her. Because of this, we have to examine the actions of Rory Street before she died. As the defense, we understand that it can be scary to speak up to an authority figure, to show weakness and ask for a break. But no one knows what's going on inside of your head, inside of your body, better than you do. Burma Road was a drill that Rory had run before. And you need to think about why she suddenly dropped dead this time. You heard today that drug use makes you more susceptible to heat stroke, and that Rory had cocaine in her system at the time that she died. She didn't have a chance, but not because of what Coach Taylor was doing, because of what she had done before practice. How was Coach Taylor supposed to know that Rory would show up to soccer practice with drugs in her system? He could not have possibly predicted this. And you can't prevent what you can't predict. No. As the defense, we're not here to make light of what happened on September 7th, 2018. We're not here to minimize the loss and the pain suffered by Rory Street's family and her friends. We sympathize with Jordan Street for the loss of her daughter. But we cannot hold Coach Taylor liable for something he could not have foreseen. Because of this, I ask that you find the only verdict that the evidence allows. I ask that you find Reese Taylor not liable. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Wallet, 22 seconds, and I'll start whenever you begin. I'll count you down 10 seconds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Whenever you're ready.
You can prevent what you know might happen. Your Honor, we'll give defense the benefit of the doubt. And we ask today that you apportion 15% of the liability to Miss Street because she didn't beg for mercy each time the defendant required her teammates to slam her to the ground, and then find him liable.
All right, I'm going to take my ruling under advisement, and with that, the court will now, it now stands recess. If all the scoring judges can go ahead and email your ballots in, quickly fill them out, and if everybody can stay in the room for a moment until I get the text message saying that we're all good to move on. Very good job, by the way. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for letting me be a part of it. It was a whole lot of fun. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.